All right, guys, welcome back. And tonight we're going to be going over a topic that I get lots of questions about, and that is tumblers. More specifically, how do you do tumblers? What's the preferred method? What machine do you like? And we're going to go over a few things that you should know if you're planning on doing a lot of tumblers. And we're going to touch on my latest setup that I use for doing tumblers. I've been doing some testing with it today, and so far I am impressed. So if you've got a laser and you like doing tumblers, this is probably something you're going to want to watch. So stick around and we'll be right back. All right, guys, so I want to start off by saying this video is more about how I'm doing my tumblers and how I like to do my tumblers. You may want to do differently. You may have different opinions. And if so, so be it. But this is the methods and the things that I have determined through my experience with testing, multiple lasers over the past 4 years. Now, there's something that I'd like to point out is in order to do tumblers, like powder-coated tumblers is what we're talking about, where you take the tumbler itself and you remove the powder coating and expose the metal. This is kind of when I say engraving tumblers, this is what I'm talking about. You're technically not engraving tumblers as much as you're engraving powder coating and removing it from the tumbler. So just to be specific, if we were actually engraving the metal on the tumbler, that would be a different video. So this video pertains to taking tumblers, removing the powder coat to make an awesome image like that right there. Now, I've done hundreds of these over the past 4 years. And there's some things that I want to share with you guys and kind of point out as we walk through this video. Up until recently, the majority of the tumblers that I had done were done with diode lasers. I started out in the early days, and I'm going to try to share some pictures with you as we go. I started out in the early days with an X-Tool D1. I had the original roller. That was all I had when I first started back in 2021 when I bought my first X-Tool D1 laser. Then over time, I've moved up. I've gotten different machines. I've used some Atomstack machines to do it. I've got my Enclosure Zilla over here has the Atomstack X40 Max in there. I've used the Rotary MK2 30 watt and used the F1, the F1 Ultra. I've used fiber lasers such as my Monport GA30, the ComMarker B4. I've used the Monport 60 watt MOPA. I've used several lasers on tumblers. Blue lasers do tumblers okay. Once you find the right settings, they work great. I love them. Up until, for the past 2 years, the X-Tool S1 has been my go-to machine to do tumblers. I've done countless tumblers. I've lost count of how many I've done on the machine. It does a great job. I've used other machines and done a great job with the blue diode as well. But there's this one caveat. If you've ever done tumblers with a blue diode, you'll understand, is that the settings that you would use for this tumbler would be different than the settings for this tumbler, would be different for the settings in a red tumbler, a blue tumbler, a white tumbler, and that can create some issues because with the blue diodes, the light is a lot more apt to reflect based on the color of the powder coat on the tumbler. So my experience with CO2 lasers are more consistent regardless of the color of the coating. So with a CO2 laser, it seems to me that I get more consistent results regardless of what color the tumbler is and regardless of how light or dark the color is. So I have been, for the past 6 months or so, trying to come up with a way of doing tumblers with the CO2, and reason being is I do a lot of one-offs, and doing one-offs, it's really good money, but it can be very risky as well, because if you are used to doing like orange Yetis and you do a blue Yeti with a blue laser, two totally different settings. Whereas if with a CO2, typically those settings are going to be close enough that it's going to work. It may not be exactly the way you want it, but typically it's going to work. And so that's what I've been trying to do, is come up with a way so that I can quit using the blue diode, the S1, even though I love it for doing tumblers. It's a great machine for tumblers if that's your price point and that's where you're at. But I've had all these CO2 machines sitting around, and I'm like, I want to use a CO2 because it's, like I said, that level of forgiveness that comes with that CO2 as compared to the blue or the fiber laser. I had my X-Tool P2. And I love X-Tool machines. My F1 Ultra is great. The S1 has been a great tumbler machine for a couple of years, but I'm trying to get away from the blue diode. The P2, although it is awesome for flat sheet goods, for wood projects, for all those things that are flat, I love it. But for rotary work, it is too smart for its own good for rotary work, in my opinion, because of the way that it calculates the height and distance and thickness and all that. It just makes it harder to set up to do repetitive tumblers, in my opinion. You may be a master at it and know your way around XCS, and you may have it down to a science. But for me, I could never get consistent results that were, where I'm not having to reposition the rotary every time I engraved one. But I had the Omtech. Now, the Omtech machine is not without its faults when it comes to doing tumblers. Yes, Omtech does offer 2 rotaries with their machine when they sell it to you. And this is what they look like. They send you 2 because they have the different spacing on these little rollers right here. And although functional, these are not ideal for me. As far as flat rollers go, they do have this little scissor lift built into this side. It makes it okay. I mean, I've did some tumblers with this and it worked, but it is not ideal for me. But what I was able to do was steal the plug off of that guy, and I was able to take this plug, which just has this little end right here that connects into a stepper. I managed to find a stepper extension cable laying around my shop that has a male on one end and a female on the other, and I've connected it to the Omtech. Now, using the factory pinout for this and an extension cable, it's working. It's running the correct direction. It's working like it's supposed to be. All I had to do was go into Lightburn. I did have to figure out the steps per rotation on it, because I had the steps per the millimeters per rotation, but I didn't have the steps. So I had to do a little bit of calculation on that, but I got that figured out, got it set up, and it is doing a pretty good job for me. Actually, it's doing a really good job. I've been able to turn these tumblers out today. I've did a host of other test tumblers as well, just trying to make sure that my theory with the color was true. I've done red, I've done pink, I've done blue, I've done all the different colors that I have over here in my test cups, and so far the one setting worked on all of them. It worked on every tumbler that I've tested today. I had to do a little bit of tweaking early on because I had a little bit of leave, so I had to raise the focus a little bit and change the LPI, but so far the settings that I used on this tumbler have worked on every other tumbler that I've tested, regardless of the color. These 2 test tumblers were done with the same exact settings. So that's a win in my book. So that's what I've been working on today, guys. And I know a lot of you have asked about the Omtech, and that's been my biggest complaint, was the way that they had it set up as far as doing rotary work. This is a bit of a workaround. It is a bit of a rig, so to speak, but for now I have the machine. It's doing a great job, and so I'm going to show you the different parts and different things that I did to make this work. So this is my Omtech Polar Plus. This is a 55 watt desktop CO2. It's nothing extravagant. It doesn't have all the smart technologies and stuff like that, which is a great thing in my opinion. The first thing that I did is I had to develop some risers for it because it only had these little white legs right here, and that wasn't giving me quite enough space to work with under here. And besides, I like storing things such as my speed and power test underneath here. Once I got the risers on there, I got it up to where I had a little room to work underneath it. I've also created these little files here and cut these pieces out What that does is that basically attaches this machine to the tabletop here so that it cannot move independent of the table. And you'll see why I did that here in just a second. So in here, this is this really small opening. I'm not real sure why they did that, other than maybe to make the machine a little sturdier so that it doesn't bend or whatever. But I wish they'd have went ahead and cut this completely out under here in the bottom. And just throwing it out there, guys, if this thing continues to serve me well and I don't replace it with something different, it's probably going to get cut from here on over to here and back down around through there, because I cannot find any reason why I shouldn't. That would give me a lot more room using the rotary, because they've limited your rotary space by doing this. But as you can see here, I've also got the rotary set up to where it sits in that little hole right there. This little opening is just the right size to hold the chuck, and it doesn't allow the chuck to move, so I don't have to worry about anything getting shifted while I'm changing out tumblers or whatever. Also, I've got these little stickers. It came with these, but I had to relocate them for my alignment. So I've got those to where I know exactly where I need to slide this once I get a cup in there. And then once I slide that, this is centered on the rotary. So that makes setup really simple. All you have to do is chuck the cup into here, slide this forward, get those two lines right there lined up, and then I can go over to the controller. I move over, set the origin to where I want it, and then send the file and let it go. So that worked out pretty well. Now, one thing that I will say is, you notice this right here on the front of the machine. Well, that's not exactly factory. Omtech, when they designed this machine, and like I said, I'm not sure what they were thinking, they designed it with this. All right, this is the front panel, and it has this little tray that is your crumb tray. Well, that's fine as long as you're needing the crumb tray, but you can't put the crumb tray in there and use the rotary. So crumb tray has to come out in order to use the rotary. So you're asking, well, what is this? Well, this is another file. This is wood. This is some 1/4-inch plywood. I got some magnets that I entered into the ends of it right there. And I got this little piece here that kind of acts, it just kind of helps hold it in place. So this little wood panel just goes on there, and then when you slide this up, it just kind of sets in there. That helps maintain the enclosure to be able to pull the fumes and stuff out, as well as it protects your eyes, because there would be nothing in there, because without this little panel, that's what it would look like. And that's not very safe, guys, when the laser's running, because you're doing stainless steel tumblers, so there's going to be a little bit of reflectivity with that. And you can see I've got my little platform, because I built my little 3D legs a little higher than they needed to be. I had to build this up just a little, but it was just easier to do that with a couple more layers, because that allows me to be able to take those screws loose and lower that down if I need to, in case I'm doing something bigger, and instead of having to reprint my little 3D legs. But yeah, there you go. That's how I've got it set up, but this is required, and I'm not sure why Omtech set the machine up to where, you know, you had to take this chrome tray out in order to use the chuck, because it slides over the hole, but yet they didn't give you anything to go back in the hole. So I made my own out of laser cut materials, got it put together, and got everything in there. And if you're not familiar with this machine, I will show you. Back here is where the chuck connects, and then you have a switch here for rotary or standard. And when you put it in standard right there, you have to, with this machine, it has to be in standard when it powers up with this rotary, because it's going to automatically home whether you have it turned on in light burn or not, unless you go into the Rotary controller and change it. So once the machine goes over, it gets back there, it homes itself. All right, once it homes, I can reach under here, flip this switch, and now the gantry is free to move. And that's when I line this little guy here up. And then you would go over to the Rotary controller, and you can move this over, get it to where you want your origin to be. This little button in the center right here sets your origin. All right, because this one doesn't have a pointer, you'll see my little mark that I've made right there that tells me exactly where the laser is. So I'm gonna line that up with the edge of this tumbler here. And this is the file that's burned to that one. So I'm gonna go over here, now that I've got everything moved, you can see I've got my lines lined up over here on the side. I'm gonna go ahead and hit frame and frame this out on this tumbler. Then you'll see that it frames it, and then it's going to return back to the center of it's going to be 150 on the y-axis and back to the origin. So there we are. That's how it works. You can see it in action. I got plenty of videos of that as far as the B-roll goes. We'll play a little bit of that along the way. All right, there you have it, guys. It did take a little bit of engineering. It did take the creation of a few files, but I've been able to get me a CO2 machine set up, and it's doing a great job with these tumblers. It is consistent because of the way that everything sets up. Everything's fixed. The machine is fixed to the table. The rotary is fixed to the table. So once I set the file up, set the tumbler up, and send the file over to the Rotary controller, once it's on that controller, it's on the machine, I can sit there and just batch those things out one right behind the other. Once it runs the first one, all I've got to do is push the gantry back out of the way without moving the head. You don't want to move the x-axis. You only want to move the y-axis back out of the way. I put another tumbler in. I pull the y-axis back to me, lining up those two little indicator marks right there so that I'm at the peak of that tumbler, and then just go over to the controller and hit the button to start it again. And so it's very consistent. Like I said, everything is indexed basically off of each other. And so that's what I like to have. That's the way I've had my S1 set up for a couple of years. It works great. And now that I've kind of got the hang of this one and got to using it in user origin, it works really well. And the reason I learned how to use user origin with these things is because my friend Tim over at the trophy shop, they have a Thunderbolt, which is Thunder Laser's version of this, basically, kinda. It's a desktop machine, but it's got a RF tube rather than a glass tube, and it does tumblers really, really well. Now, I will say, for the money that you pay for this machine, it's not a bad CO2. I've had really good luck with it. It does a good job for my bamboo cutting boards, and now that it does tumblers, it's gonna sit right here until something better comes along. So I've moved the P2 out because I use the P2 to cut acrylics and stuff like that, but this one can do that also. It does have that capability. It doesn't have the accurate camera and all that, but it runs with light burn natively, and so I kind of like that. And tumblers is one of the things that I sell a lot of, and I'm needing to free up a little space in here at the moment, so that's going to help me out with that. But if you want to go look at the machine, I will drop some links down below. Those are affiliate links, of course, for the Polar Plus. And also, they've got some rotaries on Omtech's website that you can also get to go with the machine. But they're kind of pricey. So the R1, it comes from Atomstack. For the price that you pay, in my opinion, and what it's capable of doing, it's a really good deal compared to some of the other ones. Now, in a perfect world, I would have myself like a Pyburn or Roto Boss or something like that, but I don't have one of those, and I make do with what I've got here because, like I said, I'm $15-20 a piece for tumbler engraves. It's nothing for me to turn out a $600 job over the weekend. So I make good money using this basic equipment. You don't necessarily have to have the latest and greatest. Although, like I said, I do plan one day to get me a little nicer rotary because they're out there, but they're not affordable. As you can see, they're very expensive. But good setup for what I'm doing, for the money that's involved in the machine, in the rotary. It does me a great job. Like I said, even this badge that I did, the graphic didn't work out the way that I wanted to because some of the detail in it is really, really super thin. And with the settings that I had and the focus that I'm running, having the focus lifted up and everything, I lost a little bit of the detail. But this is a two-sided engrave. Turned out really nice. You can see I've got good clean burns, no overburning, no charring on the cup, no marks, scratches. It just looks good. So this is my new setup, guys. This is going to be it for the foreseeable future until something better comes along. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. If you're interested in a desktop CO2, maybe this one's a little out of your budget or whatever, my buddy Steve over at Rotary workshop, he just did a review on the Omtech Polar Lite, I think is what they're calling it. It's a little bit of a downgraded version of this machine, but it's a very usable machine for somebody just getting started that wants the power and abilities of a CO2 without the price of a major CO2. So you might want to go look at it, because even though it's not exactly what this machine is, so far he seems to be pretty impressed with what you're getting for the money spent. So I'll drop a link to Steve's video down below as well. And if you're around on Sunday nights, guys, come check out the Sunday Night Live. We've been doing it for 140 episodes now, every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Central. If you got laser questions, CNC questions, business questions, or questions about the weather, drop in, hang out with us, and we'll at least try to amuse you if we don't try to give you some information that helps you out in your journey of laser or CNC business. So until next time, guys, be safe and have a good day.